Good afternoon. For those who have joined us already, welcome. We'll be starting in about 3 or 4 minutes from now. Thank you. Mike, quick check and just make sure you can still hear me.
I'm here, Dean.
Perfect. All right, thanks. Just want to make sure I didn't lose you. Okay, Mike, we're going to get started right now. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's Quality Center PSO webinar. This is the last in our Autumn Safety Culture series. Today's presentation is titled Socializing Measures of Harm, the NextPlane High Reliability Measures Program. I want to give a special welcome to all of our NextPlane PSO partners across the country, and thanks for joining us. So before we get started, I'd just like to go over some logistics for today's webinar. All lines are currently muted and in listen-only mode. Feel free to ask questions or make comments using the question or comment box located in the control panel for the GoToWebinar platform throughout the session. You may also ask questions by raising your hand using the click on the hand icon also in the control panel. If you are called in over the phone, we can unmute lines at the end of the webinar and address any questions that you want to ask over the phone. But again, if you just want to chat questions or comments in, do that through the questions or comment pane. We do ask that if you're speaking live that you announce yourself and your name and the organization you're representing before speaking. We are recording today's session and we'll make it available on the Quality Center PSO website for Quality Center PSO members. And there was a question already came in about access to previous webinars in this series. And yes, those are up on the website. And if you need access to those and you can't find those, you can just send us an email. You can respond to the webinar invite and we'll get you access to those recordings if you're unable to locate them. So presenting today, we're pleased to have Mike Personette, who's the president of NextPlane Solutions, our vendor for the safety platform. So at this time, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Mike. Mike, and I'm handing you to the controls right now.
Great. Thanks, Dean. Let me get a second here just to share my screen, folks. Okay. Great. So first of all, thank you all for taking an hour out of your day today. Some of you might be right on your lunch hour, so appreciate that. Always tricky getting a good time across the country to fit in these webinars for everyone, but I really appreciate your attendance. Just kind of scanned the attendee list, and looks like we have a great turnout. As you all know, this webinar in particular is sponsored by the Quality Center in North Carolina. But as part of the NextPlane ecosystem, we have a number of invites through all the membership across the country of various PSOs that are using NextPlane. I'll be talking about those in a few slides. But want to welcome all of you across the country for this session. We're going to spend the day talking specifically about some measurements that we created really tied into the National Patient Safety Foundation Free from Harm document and other initiatives where we felt that there was a gap essentially in safety programs' ability to sort of track from not just event volume and that level of activity, but through the learning cycle of patient safety. And that we were really missing a pretty critical component there of what are we learning and what actions are we taking. So that's why we've coined this the learning system, the Patient Safety Learning Systems Collaborative. Our purpose with this is to really help people sort of broaden their perspective of what a good safety program looks like. This is not a program that targets a specific clinical issue or service-related issue. It's about the safety program itself, the underlying components of your safety program. And the intention is to help make sure that through comparing yourselves with others, or just frankly using these internally within your organization, that you can help communicate the strength or the weaknesses within your ability to learn from your safety events, but more broadly, any sort of safety awareness or near miss risk or any of those types of things, that you're able to communicate that out to your stakeholders within your organization. We think it will help safety leaders promote, frankly, and vie a bit for some focused projects if you need to sort of ramp up components of your safety program, such as really investing and doubling down on our ability to study and learn from events through root cause or other sorts of cause formats. So the intention is to drive and measure that sort of journey into high reliability. We believe that these measures, but more broadly, your safety program as a whole, is critical to make some good progress on patient safety. There are other components, and we're not trying to collect all of that in here, culture being huge, of course, and we're not trying to sort of replicate things that have been done well elsewhere, but these particular measures and this particular program fills a void that we believe is out there that's worth tracking. So I mentioned we tried to correlate this with some national initiatives and believe that we've tied in well with a few of the recommendations from the Free from Harm research or call to action, really, from NPSF. And I found these couple of quotes particularly connected to the purpose of our measurement program. And, you know, really this generated from the idea or from conversations across the membership, our ecosystem membership across the country, where we have good flow of data around event volume. You know, people have spent the last 5+ years automating their event reporting systems. It's still primarily voluntary based, but we've picked up some things that get a little more automated into the EHR, or for focus areas like infection prevention, we've now adopted even bigger systems focused on that. So there have been a lot of pockets of progress out there, and the events have started to flow very seamlessly. Since I say that, taking a little bit of credit for our NextPlane PSOs, having invested in that to ensure that it is seamlessly. If you are a visitor from outside of the ecosystem, you may argue that, and we would welcome you to get in touch with us so we can explain how that can be much simpler. But that flow of information into the patient safety organization for events has really become pretty smooth. But when we get into talking about RCA and action plans in these measures, it gets a little tricky. Frankly, it gets a lot more tricky. The formats by which we're collecting that information, the process that we're pushing those through are very different, organization by organization. And so these measures have a couple easy ones that are event-based, and then a couple more challenging ones that get into your volume and churn of learning and action. But they embrace this concept from the Free from Harm document, specifically on three recommendations if you've tied your safety program to this. So first, in the second recommendation of that document, 2.2 specifically, they talk about expanding and accelerating collaborative improvement efforts in patient safety across the care continuum. And there, specifically with this program, you're able to come in, share these measures within your PSO, and compare yourselves with others that have participated. So you're tying in with that collaborative improvement effort, specifically for your patient safety program as a whole, and I'm going to say that about 50 more times today, because it's foundational. You've got to have that working well in order to feed the rest of your focus areas and improvement activities. So we believe we've got a strong tie to that. And then in recommendation 3, specifically 3.1 and 3.3. 3.1 is not necessarily for healthcare organizations directly, but as an industry, we want to be able to create a portfolio of national standard patient safety process and outcome metrics across the care continuum, and get rid of, maybe most importantly, get rid of invalid measures. And here we believe, at least from our ecosystem perspective, we're contributing to that body of work. As participation in this program kicks up, as we have good success stories to share, we will be making the case that these are good foundational patient safety program measures that have been working well, which is a key criteria to get them into the national standard structures. So we hope we can eventually evolve these into that level and have a good foundational metric for patient safety. And then for 3.3, improve your safety reporting systems to ensure that appropriate system improvements are implemented and that timely feedback is provided to all involved. And that one we're really just sitting right on top of. That's very core to these measures and the intention of this project. Okay, just a quick reminder, if anyone does have questions as we're going through the day today, because we do have your lines muted, go ahead and use the chat or question panel over in the GoToWebinar panel and queue those questions up. We'll have a Q&A at the end to cover those, but if anything particularly relevant or timely pops up, we'll try to address those as they're coming through. So just a reminder, if those things are coming up, go ahead and drop them into the panel now and we can start queuing them up or address them. Okay, so the measures are around first detection, and these are the two easy ones. We want to have two detection measures that look at your voluntary reports, your perhaps assessments, FMEAs, audits, huddles, surveillance. All these types of techniques or methods increase your ability to detect safety concerns. It is far from just being about knowing when someone is harmed within your organization. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this because we found through our aggregate data that the ratio of near misses to significant events, those that have reached the patient and caused harm, is really kind of out of whack. We were really surprised, frankly, to see that for every incident, something that's reached the patient and caused harm, we're getting less than one near miss. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, but the ratio was flipped from what we expected. Now, in some organizations that NextPlane, in addition to the PSO platform, has its own event reporting system that we offer, as well as consulting projects that we work with for folks. So we have some direct connection with, at a more deeper level, with healthcare organizations where we can really get into the reasons why the near miss to incident ratio is off. And in organizations that we've worked with that have really made an effort to turn this around, the ratio is more like 20 near misses to 1 that reach the patient and caused harm. So it can really, we can invert this with some focused work and effort within your organizations. But that's the genesis of these first two. And the good news is they're the easy ones. You know, we now have over 800 hospitals reporting information into our PSO platforms, and doing that primarily on a monthly basis, some still on a quarterly basis, and have been able to take a broad look at this activity. And what we know, as we've worked with folks to do their mapping for the submission, specifically on the severity scale, is that A, everybody has a severity scale. That wasn't the case 5 years ago, but everyone is scoring their events, whether they're a near miss or reach the patient, with some type of scale. The AHRQ common formats includes a nice scale. That's, of course, what the most PSOs have adopted. The traditional A through I scale, going back to the medication event days, has a nice scale that many had adopted years ago. There are some other proprietary scales out there if you're working with certain groups that you may be adopting. But the gist of it is this is a pretty easy one to map and aggregate around, and everyone tracks this locally. I think the biggest challenge that people have in applying that scale is twofold. Two things that we see most common as barriers to having quality data in your severity scale. One, you're asking your frontline staff to answer the question. And it's a rather intimidating question to try to be that precise. If you think about the most common out there being the A through I scale, if you think about asking your frontline team as they're reporting the event initially to score it on a 1 to 9, have 9 options, and they're very kind of, is it that one or this one? It tends to freeze people up and not answer it at all. And then if you require it, most times we see that people who require that answer also have a choice to choose unknown. And so we see a lot of unknowns. So a trick for that you can consider adopting locally is to change the location, essentially, of that question in your workflow of an event. Don't ask that question in full on your initial event report. For that team, they really only know, did it reach the patient and did it cause a level of harm that we're really worried about? And if you can come up with your own custom question within your system to just ask that when you're doing the initial report, then later in the investigation process and the analysis process, you can get a little more granular and choose the exact scale item that you've learned about now that the event's been worked for a few days. So that's a nice trick to kind of ease the burden of your frontline staff who need to report these, and you get a better indicator initially anyways with a shorter scale, but then still grow into the fact that you do want to get a more precise score on that, typically 1 to 9 or 1 to 10 options. So if you're able to sort of enhance your system locally a bit to really get good quality data in this, in your severity scoring, then you should be able to pull a report from your system that summarizes by severity, and our measure defines what we call a reported significant event, which is essentially anything that reached the patient and caused harm. It is a D or higher in the A through I scale. And it is, let's see, an incident with harm in the AHRQ scale. So it's pretty simple. That's an easy line to draw in any severity scale that reached the patient and caused harm. So in that summary report, from whatever system you use, you're just going to run that report and add them up for the month. Maybe 5 or 6 numbers to add up. Hopefully you have access to a volume metric for adjusted patient days, adjusted to include outpatients. This is not a risk-adjusted number at this point. It's just your inpatient days and then your adjustment calculation to convert outpatient activity into days. It's very common in your finance team. They'll be able to hand that to you on a monthly basis. And then the other measure requires the flip side of your severity. It requires you to track those that did not reach the patient, near misses, or they may have reached the patient, but they're no harm events. And if you can get to those 3 numbers, 2 of which come right out of your event reporting system, 1, a very common metric from your finance organization, you can submit these 2 measures, reported significant events per adjusted patient days. The intention there is to give us a feel as we're comparing folks to the volume of your organization and the volume of your events with harm. Then the second one is the reported significant events per near miss or no harm events. So it's essentially a ratio that gives us a feel for the volume of your early detection tools. How well are you being informed of things before they reach the patient or before they cause harm? And those 2, most people have been able to adapt their systems if necessary, but many just have this in a pretty handy format to participate in the program. Okay, the next 2 are a little trickier. From more of a sort of accumulating the counts perspective, you're all doing this. It's just a matter of putting something in place so you can count them on a monthly basis. And that first one is the events analyzed through a credible method per reported significant event. So you already have the denominator, reported significant events. What you have to think about getting is how many events did you analyze through a credible method? And we have a document that defines what we consider a credible method. But think root cause, apparent cause analyses, something more than just a simple comment back from the team lead that they address the issue. We want something heavier than that, essentially, but doesn't have to be a full-blown RCA either. Essentially, you've invested some time to learn from this and validate the learning was accurate, is what we're looking for here. And we want to look at that over the number of RSEs that you've had in the month so that we can see essentially your learning rate, or your analysis rate, and understand comparatively if you can kind of follow this through on a chart that you're thinking about, where maybe you're reviewing 20% of every RSE is going through a deeper analysis, but the average is 35%. And perhaps, and those are just made up numbers, don't anybody write those down and report them to your board next month. Just as an example, if you can see that difference, then you know you're studying less than others. Doesn't necessarily mean they're better, you're not, but you're studying less than others. And you can take a look to see if you're really getting the value that you want out of the analysis effort made within those. And the other caveat to this is it doesn't have to be an RSE that you study. You may very well choose to analyze near misses. They're just as important from an early detection perspective. So those count in the numerator. We're just using RSE as a denominator because it is sort of the steady, you can validate that. It's not as variable as near miss activity out there. So we felt like it was a more stable denominator to track your activity. And then lastly, the learning and improvement measure gets into your action planning. And here we're looking for you to adopt the NPSF Strength of Action scale. This is really closely tied with the RCA squared publication from NPS a few years ago, largely hooked into the VA National Patient Safety Federation model. Sorry, National Patient Safety Center model, where you're scoring each action item in an action plan. So if you think of your action plan spreadsheet from your last RCA and you've got 10 action items in there, each row in that spreadsheet will have a score, which we've adopted the NPSF scale, that assigns essentially a 1 to 7 value to every action. And you can imagine it goes from education, basically telling everybody not to do that anymore, is a low strength of action, to permanently engineering things out of your system where they become impossible for anyone to have that issue repeated, is a very strong action that scores as a 7. And so I'll share the document here in a bit, but that's the gist of this measure, is to then accumulate that sum of strength and look at that over the number of credible analyses that you've performed. So again, a way to gauge your level of strength of actions from your action plan, the quality of actions you're getting from your team, and seeing that over the number of significant events that you're having locally, or I'm sorry, the number of credible analyses that you're conducting, gives you a rate of learning essentially from that effort that you all are making. Okay, so here are the PSO ecosystem members. All of these folks use the NextPlane platform to data platform and have wanted to participate in this measurement study. So the vast majority. We have a couple actually who participate, but don't wish to be shared here with their logos, and just one that opted out. So if you're a member of any of these PSOs, you're free to contact your PSO contact directly and ask them about participating in the program, but we also facilitate that. So don't hesitate to reach out to NextPlane directly as well, and we can help facilitate your participation and coordinate with your PSO. You can reach us, and I'll give you this at the end as well, but you can reach us at support@nextplanesolutions.com. And we can get you the measure detail, answer questions that you have as you're trying to implement these, and get you connected within your PSO community, where this information will then be shared and discussed as teams come up to speed and start participating. Just some quick numbers on the ecosystem. We have a broad participation. So this is at the NextPlane level, but within that, within your PSO, there's similar breakdown. In other words, we have a lot of community teaching and academic medical centers, pretty reflective of the national makeup of primarily acute care hospitals. So you'll have a peer in the collaborative, and have some folks that you'll be able to compare yourself with. Okay, so in order to participate, what's required? First, your organization needs to do a little bit of planning to make sure you'll be able to enter your data essentially timely. This really ties into sort of a monthly close process. So if you're doing that, if you're producing reports for your organization on a monthly basis to feed back to your departments or to feed into your committees, you've got a process where hopefully, by the 10th day following the end of the month, you're pushing your teams to make sure they've at least touched every one of the events that have been reported within the prior month, closing out some action items if you can. You're just kind of getting your data reflective of the previous month as well as you can, say it's the 10th or 15th day of the month. Following that, you're producing reports that would then feed right into this program. So we encourage you to think about it as just part of your monthly reporting process, because what we're asking for would be really beneficial for you to track within your own organization regardless. So think about tying it in that way. You may need to adapt a few things. The summarization of events by severity should be something you run all the time now. So that's probably pretty simple, but you might need to think a little bit about how you're tracking your RCAs. You know, those don't start and finish in a day. So how do you kind of log active RCAs? If you're delegating those out to your teams, you're probably implementing some kind of tracking. Maybe it's in a spreadsheet to know that they're out, that they're due back on a certain day, who to contact. If you're actually conducting those RCAs, then you have more intimate knowledge about where they are. And we're looking for, you report that when they're closed. So when you complete the RCA, that's the month that it falls in. So you might need to adapt a few things there. And then on the action plan logs, you're definitely documenting an action plan. Just depends on what kind of system you're using. Maybe it's a spreadsheet. And in wherever that's happening, action scale, which is in our documentation, so you can incorporate that score at an action item level. And we also recommend a few other considerations to help improve the strength of action that you're getting from your teams in the program. Then monthly, you're going to run your reports, accumulate your data, and enter those to the system at NextPlane by the 20th of each month. Then hopefully run your analysis to see where you stand, and hopefully then invest more time. The focus here is investing time on the improvement side. Review your performance and what areas you need to focus on to improve your learning system as a whole. Remember, it's that foundational aspect of your patient safety learning system that we're measuring and looking for improvement in. So sitting back and taking a look at this and looking at perhaps what teams or departments are lagging behind, what buttons you can push to try to increase your overall performance in the, actually your overall results from your learning system. And then your PSO will be working with you to collaborate with other organizations and participate in those learning opportunities that your PSO facilitates to see if we can drive that improvement that we're looking for, 25% over the next 24 months. A little bit on current participation. I would say at this point it's sort of pocketed participation, depending on how much activity has been generated from the PSO and from some work with NextPlane and just how that's kind of gone on. So we kicked this off officially in the first quarter of the year and have been working with folks as they're adapting and some participating fully since the beginning of the year. And so that's accumulating now into these collaboratives to really start engaging with your peers on how to improve. But of course, as more participate, that gets bigger and all that just sort of rolls downhill. So we welcome anyone to join at any time to come in and share your data and start learning how you might be able to, what areas you might want to focus on to improve your program. Okay, so I mentioned a few times this ratio of incidents to near misses. And this was where we were pretty surprised by the broad results. And we did a national analysis across all of our participants, over 800 hospitals, 3.5 million events, and broke that down by facility and calculated the red portion of the circle chart here represents harm events, and the blue represents near miss or no harm incidents, reached the patient but didn't cause harm. So that's what we were surprised by, the fact that for basically every one near miss, we were getting 2 incidents with harm. And we fully expected that to be flipped. And this is really the genesis of this measures program, is that if you just do one thing for me at the end of this webinar, go calculate your own internal reported significant events to near miss no harm event ratio. And if you're getting more incidents with harm than you're getting near misses or no harm events, I would really encourage you to participate in the program. If nothing else, we want to flip this, but as I said, with organizations we've worked more directly with over a longer period of time, usually 3 to 6 months, they're able to flip this into numbers that shock me. 20, some 30 near miss, no harm events per every incident. Now, I'd love to say that's because they're preventing harm and that number's dropped, but that's not really the cause. The fix to this is that you're increasing your awareness and detection abilities and having reliable data to trend to identify things to go work on. So it's unfortunately not that harm is falling off the table and dropping to really low levels. We know that's a much more difficult thing to do and wouldn't possibly be done in 3 months. What we're really doing is increasing your near miss, no harm detection rates, which means your staff is more engaged, they're more aware, and are willing to report those things into your organization. And most key to this, and through your event reporting system. You know, one of the sort of trade-offs on this, and one of the things you have to address when it increases, is the idea that you're going to have a lot more data to work with. So you might find yourself in a position that's really a good position to be in. As the safety team, you may not be able to look at every single near miss or incident with no harm anymore. You'll have to delegate that out and manage the process, manage that every department is getting that kind of early detection. And that, if we get there, that's a really meaningful gain on your early detection rate. So that's one of the goals, and this is one of the reasons we launched this project. To get to this ratio, I will say too, we threw out a ton of outliers that were even a lot worse and even more concerning. So we really think this is a national issue that folks have not realized the benefits of their local systems and have not really been able to increase their early detection tools. Okay, so what else do you get? This is a sample of a report, but it's really our call to action from the analysis we did. The comparative reports look exactly like this. This is a sample, but it's the RCA per RSE for a sample hospital here in our system. We do 2 types of reports. One is the single period result, which will bounce around a lot more, and then we do a 12-week average to smooth that out a little bit. But essentially, you'll see you can compare the green line is your rate. The blue box, the column, is the actual number of events, and the green line is the rate per 10,000 adjusted patient days. And then you'll be able to compare yourself against your PSO or against other collaboratives for this reason. So you can look at across the board with NextPlane, or you can break that down into the collaboratives that, for example, within a PSO, people who say, hey, I want to be a part of this, just saying that may put you in the collaborative that's trying to work on this. So there are different reasons we can create collaboratives for any reason, and then aggregate the data accordingly to that membership. Okay, and these are self-service reports, meaning after you enter your data to the system, you can go over and run these reports. We do require an evening to update them, but next day your data is reflected locally, and then after the 20th, or really at the end of the following month, is when you'll have some relevant comparatives. We want to let everybody else have some time to get that data in. So all this is self-service. You're not waiting on anyone to send you a PDF file. It's all stuff you control within your participation within the NextPlane platform. I should also say quickly, just in case anyone on the call came to us outside of the ecosystem. So maybe you're not a member of any of our PSOs to participate. You are certainly welcome to participate. We can work out a way either for you to come through. We'd love for you to join one of the PSOs. and participate through them and all the other benefits you'd receive from a PSO membership. But if you're in an area that doesn't really quite make sense for you, please don't feel excluded. Just contact us directly, support@nextplanesolutions.com. And if nothing else, we're happy to share the materials that we've put together for you to adopt this locally, but would also love for you to be able to participate in the platform. We can accommodate that, so don't feel left out. Okay, we're going to walk through some data entry steps, and honestly, the intention here is to show you that it's really simple and that we're ready for you. This will be pretty quick. I do want to stop and just give you a reminder for any questions or chat items to go ahead and queue those up. We're about 40 minutes into our hour, and we'll be into questions here probably with 15 minutes to go.
Yeah, and Mike, just to interject real quick, we do have about 4 questions in the queue, so I'll just sit on those unless you want to pause and address some of them now.
Why don't we go ahead, Dean? I think that'd be great, just to make sure we get the time in.
Great. Yeah, so one of the questions we got, Mike, was just asking about, do you have any primary care practices that are participating?
We don't have that at this time, no. If you are a member of a group of primary care practices, then we could accommodate your group coming in together and comparing against yourselves, essentially. At this stage, the primary participants are acute care hospitals, but we love hearing that. So we would love to figure out how to help you and have it be beneficial for you. So do reach out to us, and we'll see what we can do for you.
Yeah, Mike, another question around data submission. It's one that we hear a lot from our members. It's asking, how do you make it easy to do the right thing with reporting? Staff find the form either hard to access or takes too much time. Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, great question. I could do a whole other webinar on this. We have, in fact. So a couple tips first. Our rule of thumb when we go in on our consulting side to redesign event reporting systems, whatever that might be, is that a near miss should have no more than 10 questions, and really half of those questions should be defaulted in the form with a valid answer. For example, a couple of those easy questions are the date that it was reported and the date of the event. If they're reporting it timely, that should be today, so you can easily default 2 of the 10 answers. Where it occurred can be defaulted if you know who's reporting because they're logging into the system. So I say 10, but it's really less than that for the user to have to answer as a first tip for near misses. Backing up on the severity side, to really increase your near miss no harm rate, don't forget about all those other things that people spend too much time debating whether they should report something, and you want to remove that. So I encourage you to create a category called unsafe conditions, and that is everything else. And you want to keep that into the funnel wide open. You don't want your staff thinking about whether that should go in the system or not. Unsafe conditions should have no more than 2 or 3 fields that they'll need to fill in. So as you think about your form, unsafe conditions, 2 or 3 fields, near miss no harm, up to 10 fields, and then something that has reached the patient and caused harm, you're going to ask more questions. You still want to keep it concise, but in that case, you need to get some more answers. So probably 20 for the reporter, and do break it up so that your analysis team is then filling in another 10 or 15. But those do get a little more detailed when something has actually caused harm. So that's the first tip. Tie it to the severity. And most of the modern systems these days have skip logic built in, so that's not a big leap systematically for you to be able to adapt. The other point of emphasis here is to make as big as possible the description, the narrative description field on the screen. Use up as much real estate as you have available on the screen to visually cue the reporter that you want to hear a lot in the narrative description. Your system should be able to, and I say should, meaning you should challenge your vendors to provide this. We certainly do. We have not seen many vendors do this yet, but they need to be encouraging the story to be told by the reporter, not 15 categories to be checked off. As we've spent years doing safety analysis, and there is never the perfect click that represents all that occurred in that event. It's hard enough to get people to pick the right event type and severity correctly. So let them tell their story, and we find that the result is people want to tell their story, and they will come to a system to type in to tell their story. They won't come to a system to first go through 15 check boxes to then get an opportunity to tell their story. I think what's happened over the years is we used to love check boxes on written forms because they were easy to fill out and we didn't have to manually burn our hands out writing out all the descriptions. Then we just sort of brought that online when we adopted online systems and assumed that that was really what users wanted. When we've done user experience studies, it's the opposite. Now we can type, they want to come in and type their story, and then it's on us as safety leaders to challenge our software to do what it should do well, which is analyze that text, score that text, do things like that. And I'm sort of giving ourselves a plug here. NextPlane does that through some of our AI work and hope to be setting a higher standard for everyone to get more value out of that story. So that's the second piece, I think, of that question. Very complicated question, though, and very culturally based and somewhat system restrained. So do reach out to me directly if you have any more questions on that.
Great, thanks, Mike. And just a few others came in. This one kind of two-part question comes from Celeste Mayer in UNC, asking first, the difficulty deciding what to count each month. Giving the example that the RSCs and the RSC per near miss no harm events fit nicely into a month. However, many of the RSCs don't get analyzed until the following month. So she's saying she might have no RSCs for a single month, but have 2 RSC analyzed. And then Celeste, if was asking if just clarification of that question makes sense. And Celeste, I see you're called in, so if you want to further clarify that question, we can unmute your line. But Mike, does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a great question. And we've created, there are some choices we have to make to draw the line to say, this is what we're going to call the end of the month. And so there is a complexity of events reported this month. We're just starting November, so I'll talk about October. Events that occurred in October have not, especially if it was yesterday, have not gone through the analysis step yet. So that event will be counted in October as a significant event, as an RSE. However, the analysis will be completed, especially if it's an RCA, hopefully at some point in November. Perhaps with the holidays, maybe it even goes into December. That's okay, because as we trend this out, those sort of lines that you draw kind of fix themselves. I mean, if you have a big surge of analyses for next month, all on October, then you might have a blip on your analysis, but that smooths out, that kind of fixes itself over time. So, we sort of applied, frankly, accounting principles. They do a great job of picking end dates and when you have to make a tough choice like that in our definitions and have that laid out for you in that detail.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Mike. And then let's see. Yeah, so Celeste responded. I don't know if you can see the questions, Mike, saying thanks. That's how I've been doing it.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So just 2 more questions. Should be quick answers. One, is there a cost to participate? And then is there a minimum data requirement? Meaning, are you expecting 100 plus cases each month, or is it more like 10 to 20 per month?
Great question. So if you're in one of the NextPlane ecosystem PSOs, already. I don't want to speak for all of them, but I'm 90% sure there's no additional cost to participate in the program through your PSO. And again, I'm 90%. I'm 100% sure, but I'm not speaking on their behalf. So participate through your PSO membership. There's no additional cost to participate. If you're not in a PSO, contact us directly. I'll say it's not a huge cost. A little bit depends on the number of facilities you have, but we're trying to keep it very minimal so that you can get into the program and benefit. So reach out to me and we'll address that if you're outside of if you're not a member of the one of the NextPlane PSO ecosystem members.
Great. And did you also address about the minimum data requirement?
Oh, I'm sorry. Thanks. Sorry. So minimum data requirement, there is no minimum, but we want we want accurate counts. So if your organization only has 5 near misses next month, then 5 is your number. If you have 10 incident reports, then you're reporting 5 and 10. So there's no minimum on that at all. And if you're a smaller organization, that might be, your numbers. The reason I'm spending a little more time clarifying on it is I don't want you to leave the call thinking that you would choose which events to report. That's not what this is about. You're not sort of selecting ones. We need to see your whole program. It's applicable to your whole safety program. And I will clarify just here in these next few slides, you're entering the total. You're entering the numerator and the denominator. You're not submitting a batch file of every single event. That's our event submission process, and those are 2 parallel channels. Here, we wanted to create a simple way to just enter a numerator and denominator, and that's all you're submitting.
Okay, Mike, I think that's all the questions we have for now, if you want to.
Okay, great. All right, so I just want to show you the screens a bit and just emphasize more than anything that the system aspect of this is simple. You log into NextPlane and you land on a page similar to this. You click on the little icon here that looks like a site or target. And some of you, you may see this grayed out in your current login. That's because you're not participating. As soon as you tell us you want to participate, we flip a switch and that's live and active for you. So if you're already in NextPlane, this is how you get to it. Really simple. Then each month, we automatically queue up that month. So here just so happens it's from last year, but November 30th, 2017 is due. And when I click on the measure entry icon, this screen automatically comes up for the current month's activity. And if you're a multi-facility organization, each of your facilities will be listed. So this is first step is the numerator, and you get each numerator that we need for the month that we need for the facility or facilities that you have. You're not entering anything on the left. All you're entering is down this numerator value column. And it's a nice, simple heads down, enter your number, hit tab, enter your number, hit tab, and you can knock those out. If you have prior periods, you can click unanswered only, and it'll show you everything that you don't have a value for, or pick a specific date range and enter those. We do encourage you, if you really want to, it's optional, but some folks have opted to go back a year and pull their history, and you want to see that trended. So, more power to you. We're excited for you to do that if you want to do that. And I can see how that would be much more beneficial for you to get the ball rolling. So don't hesitate to do that. We have the data elements to manage it. Click next, and you go to the denominator entry. Same setup, except your denominators are listed, and you enter those denominators for each facility for the period, or go backwards in time, whatever you need to do there. Click next, and we just give you a review sheet so that you can see the numerator and denominator on a row for the measure that's applicable. So you can kind of get a sense of what's happening here with the rates. you click Finish, and then go to the Insight menu, the little chart icon on the left-hand side, which is active for you. However, you may not see this Measures section, which will be active once you join us in the program. And you can always download your historical data here through the Measures Detail Report, but the Measures Report is where you'll see the results trended over time. At this point, they do update nightly. We are doing some upgrades to be able to do that real time, but they are updating nightly currently. And to have valid comparatives, you do want to give everyone else some time. So if you're that hard charging go-getter that's right on time by the 20th or maybe even a little early, awesome. Come in, run the report for yourself and use it internally. Come back after the 20th. Usually I suggest the end of the month to come back and run for broader comparatives. You do have some parameters in the report to pick your as of date, of course, pick your measure, and then whether you want a 12-month rolling average or the single period, and then your collaborative. So that allows you to adjust your chart accordingly. And then we already talked through the chart elements. So your rate, dual y-axis if necessary, these modify a little bit, but you can also click on any of these lines to remove them, to show or hide them. I'm sorry, you click on the legend to show or hide any of the comparative elements and tweak that out a little bit just for your needs. And you can download these to Excel or PDF. Frankly, most drop them in a PowerPoint slide, so just a quick screen grab right from the system is what I recommend, to get them in a PowerPoint slide for yourself. All right, and then quickly, I'll just share a quick snapshot of or a quick preview of the document. This is literally the document right in our Word application. And we'll send this to you. We send this to you if you express some interest. So we're looking for you to reach out to support@nextplanesolutions.com and show some interest in this. This is the full document that helps everyone understand the definitions, suggestions on implementing. We share some of our tips on increasing near miss, no harm activity. Most people are interested. Here's the crosswalk for severity from the AHRQ scale to the NCC MERP scale. We can help you with other crosswalks. And the other scale folks love to see that I don't want to hold back on you on here is the strength of action scale. This is the 1 through 7 scale. And we took this, it's a bit of a hybrid from the NPSF RCA squared guide. They have a little more robust scale that goes into great examples, and it's a really handy tool to have. I think I've included it in here, in fact. But then we sort of rolled that up into a 1 to 7 scale, and it really lines up nicely. But just for purposes of analysis, we rolled it up to that 1 to 7, weak to strong. Yeah, and then sorry for the scrolling, but then here is that crosswalk we took it from the National Patient Safety Foundation RCA squared, but then our scale is based on an ISMP strength of action analysis that had been done years ago that we still feel is very applicable. So we went ahead and used that same scoring scale, but applied it to the RCA squared crosswalk here. So you're welcome to this. Just email us pull the email up here at support@nextplanesolutions.com. And we'll get you in touch with that. You can also ask your PSO directly. Totally invite you to contact your PSO contacts directly and ask for the same information or ask for a meeting to discuss further. Basically to get started, you're going to get that information and review those definitions. And then we always get the question, can we participate in a few measures as we get rolling on the more complicated ones? And that answer is yes. Pull your data, start collecting. We've covered all that. So get in touch with us if you're interested at this email, or reach out to your PSO directly. Either way, we're happy to facilitate your participation. If you're not part of a NextPlane ecosystem PSO, reach out to them if you are interested in joining. We first and foremost encourage that. But if you're in kind of an area that doesn't make sense, then email us directly and we'll see what we can work out. All right, Dean, let's throw it back and check on any questions.
Yeah, hi, Mike. We got let's take one more that's come in since we last checked in. The question is if someone's already submitting data to NextPlane and they opt to participate, will some of the numerator data pre-populate from the data they've already submitted?
Yeah, great question. So we opted not to do that because of as I mentioned, the analysis we did at first to even scope this problem nationally. We think there's a gap between what you're pulling to report for patient safety to your PSO and the actual number of what's happening locally. And the only real added, I'll say cost, but added step is that you've got to enter the numerator for your reported significant events. Now, we do have a report that pulls from the event data that you submit and calculates the ratio. We haven't published it yet because, frankly, when we look at everybody's results, the numbers are still kind of whacked out. So we are going to get that pushed out and just kind of call it is what it is. We want everybody to see that. But because of that, we've asked folks to sort of validate your numerator and denominator by entering those directly to the system as a separate channel. So yes, you'll be able to get to what you've submitted, the results of what you've submitted for your event to near miss ratio. But for the measure program, we want you to enter that numerator denominator because our gut instinct is that folks, those numbers are different, and we want to give you a chance to just enter the numerator denominator separately.
Great, thanks, Mike. I'm showing that's all the questions we have, and I see that we are at the top of the hour, so just out of respect for everyone's time, I think this is probably a good spot to kind of cut things off. Do want to just kind of wrap up here and just reiterate that we, as we mentioned at the beginning, are recording the session, and we'll post it both on the website for the Quality Center PSO members in North Carolina, but also we'll send out the information to this group, everyone who registered or attended, so you have it via email as well if you're unable to access our website. And just wanted to thank everyone for joining us today, and then also especially thank Mike and NextPlane for presenting. And if there are any questions that you thought of after the fact, you can email us to us, and if we can't answer them, we'll get them to Mike and his team. We do thank you for your time. Mike, are there any kind of final comments or things you want to mention before we close out?
No, just a big thank you to everyone for your time, and we really look forward to working with you on this.
Great. Well, thanks, everyone. Again, this does conclude our session, and we thank you for your time, and you may now disconnect. Thank you.